Welcome back to the Blue Chip Academy podcast. You know, the Blueprint to Success interview series where we detail and provide unique blueprints, tactical knowledge, and best practices to navigate the critical points in the elite sports ecosystem so athletes and parents can prepare a plan and a career path that any athlete can bank on. So we're heading down to Texas in this episode. Our guest, only D2 player to pass for over 2,000 yards and run for 1,000 yards. It holds numerous records at Midwestern State University. Our guest was offered a contract but refused the offer and sprung into the next phase of his life. Let's see why and how he did it. Let's welcome the founder and CEO of Pulmonary Plus, Daniel Polk. Welcome to the show, man.
Well, thank you, my brother. Thank you. I am truly excited to see you, first and foremost, and to be a part of it. So, man, you know, I am here.
Man, this is 100%, man. This is a special episode because we talk about all the different times we go through this process. And, you know, when I lived in Dallas, Texas, when I was transitioning, towards the end of my career transitioning, D. Polk was like my neighbor and a good friend of mine. And like he was going through the process, played for the Cowboys and all that good stuff. So just trading a lot of different ideas. And he kind of paved the way and just a trailblazer into just an entrepreneurial spirit and different things. But we'll dive into that a little bit. But jumping back to his high school times, you know what I mean, and all that good stuff, looking back, you know, what advice would you give your 17-year-old self getting into the football ecosystem? You know, coming from a place like Texas, it's serious ball down there. So like, how would you approach it?
I would say the most important thing would be understanding the culture that you're in and the culture that you aspire to be in, right? Because a lot of times there may be something. I know when I was looking at my senior year, I was looking at particular colleges to attend or teams to play for, whatever the case may be. One of the things I was looking for is like, I knew that there were certain things that I was missing from my experience in high school. And I wasn't necessarily looking for that same experience because I knew that that was hindering some of my growth. And so with football in particular, it's such a team sport and it's such a systematic sport. You really have to be able to fit the culture, not only physically, but psychologically, and be able to attain skills that you know, because you have to know yourself, obviously, to be able to say, okay, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do, this is what I'm comfortable with, this is what I'm not comfortable with, and then look for different organizations to be able to fill those gaps. So the one thing that I would even, I guess you would say, emphasize even more, because I had some sense of it, but I would emphasize more is that understand who you are and who you're not, what a particular organization or school or coaching staff is, or what their track record is, what their track record is with players, what their track record is with other coaches, how they treat their colleagues, and then kind of make your decision from there.
And that's a great point that you bring up, just understanding that if you're going to play football, what comes a part of it, right? Like you jump straight into the culture, and I love that you said that because a lot of times when you hear people gripe about different things in football, it's like, oh, whether it's like speaking your mind or just different gripes around the game. My first thing is always like, well, man, you picked the wrong sport. Like you should have played tennis, golf, like ran track or something, because you can kind of make all the decisions on your own. And a lot of times the right information and how to move in different situations is a true competitive advantage when you're dealing in football, because from the coach's standpoint, man, they're managing 22 different players, players on special teams, like a lot of disciplinary, just the operations in general, and being able to fit within that culture and be an impactful player is a way of setting yourself up. So I'm happy that you jumped into that. Said a little bit about looking for a different experience and how your high school was. You know, you play football in Texas, which is a big time, you know, football area. We had a former guest from South Lake Carroll. You went to Oak Cliff. What was the differences? Like, can you give us a little bit what you were looking for in college versus how it was in high school?
In high school, so I was looking for more of a system. And what I mean by that is that my high school, from the way I viewed it at that particular time, and even looking back on it now, I think I was accurate in my presumption, is that it was too loose, right? There wasn't a system of consistency that set a certain level of expectation. And so in that, I wasn't able to fully develop, you know, because I was never a bad kid growing up. And so what happens when you don't have a system, and the system and the structure allows for, or lack thereof, allows for all these different personalities to kind of run wild, a lot of the coaching and the attention goes to players or to personalities, right, who may demand it because they may be a disruption. They may have attitude problems. They may be talented, but they carry all these other things along with it. So I knew that for me to really start to flourish, or at least reach my potential, whether that was actually flourishing athletically or not, or just as a young man coming up and learn things about life in general, is that I knew that I needed something. I needed an organization. I needed a school that had a system. And when I went to Midwestern State, literally an interesting thing at the time was that they had literally, the coach had just come, Coach Maskell, Bill Maskell, who I think is still there actually. He had just come there a year or two before and literally kicked like 20% of the team off the team. And that was because they had behavior issues, right? And it's not about judging someone, everybody's different, but it's about, hey, okay, they have a standard here, to where this is how we're gonna act, this is how we're not gonna act. And I was blessed enough to come from a 2-parent household where there were certain level of expectations that was set in my house, and that I wanted that to be carried out in the school I went to too. And so when I was going in high school, that wasn't the case. It was just too chaotic at times. And in college, I was looking for something that had structure and that was organized. So
that's some great self-awareness from a teenager when they're looking for that, right? Just understanding, again, like that focus is a competitive advantage. I had a similar experience, like going through whether K through 8 or whatever the case may be, just different distractions that are come up in school. And then when I got to high school, I transitions to different schools, just the level of focus that you're able to have, whether it's just set up by the environment or whatever the case may be. But just that light bulb that came on was like, you said, like, all right, if the teacher's not focused on X, Y, and Z or me getting better, then who's not getting better? Me. Like, but there's other places where like, yeah, like me, like that's like, it might, okay, woe is me, but no, like I need to put myself in that position for what that is. And that's pretty amazing to recognize that that's what you needed at that space. And I think that's kudos to you for just kind of wanting to maximize your process, right? Because we talk about using sports as a catalyst to a career that you can bank on here on the podcast. So having that mentality is, I think, the number one aspect is like looking for like, hey, how can I get 1% better every day? And who's going to help me set up that system to do it? Right.
Right. And you know what? I'll say this too, Justin. It wasn't so much that I knew what was going to make me better, because I didn't. You're a young man. You don't really fully know who you are. Right. But I knew what was making me worse.
That's real. That's so real.
So I was like, it was like we had talented teams at different times, but it's like, this is just not going to work for me, So that's, I do want to put that out there, because I don't want to give the impression that at 17 I knew exactly who I was and what I was going to do and all these things. That's not the case. But you do know the result of something, and you have to be mindful in looking at cause and effect. And if you can do that, and you should be able to do that at 16, 17 years old as a young man, if you can look at cause and effect independent of your emotions, right? Rationally look at the cause and effect and say, hey, this is the effect, and then work your way backwards. I think you'll end up in the right spot.
That's a great point, man. Just like that reverse engineering of whatever you want to do, right? That goal, work backwards. And it's just like, how am I setting myself up and giving myself that leverage to attain that goal, right? In the best way.
Right.
So when did you start getting attention from colleges when you were in high school?
I would say junior year. Okay. A lot of my attention, like in high school, I think I was 6'1", 188, over like a 4'5". Like I wasn't like overly fast, but athletic enough, I would say, right? And so I did in my freshman and I never played JV. My freshman year, and then I went to varsity. I played different positions though, right? So I was, I played safety. I played a little bit of corner, and I was athletic enough to play quarterback too. So I kind of settled at quarterback. Most of my college interest was based on me playing like wide receiver, corner, safety. So they was looking at, this kid, I'm 6'1", athletic. I played multiple sports, baseball and basketball as well. I was athletic. I was like all district and things like that. I had natural ability, but I was so fixed on playing quarterback, right? I just really wanted to play quarterback. And to be honest with you, I'm going to tell you why. It wasn't that I didn't feel like I wasn't scared to hit people or get hit and all these things, whatever. It was more so I didn't like the lack of control that came with playing those other positions. So I'm not saying that, other athletes should be stubborn in their position selection, but just for me at the time, I just was like, man, listen, I don't trust. And I think some of that came from being in a chaotic organization, right? So I couldn't trust. I was like, man, you can't trust your teammates. They may be over here doing this. They supposed to be running, this route or doing this assignment. They ain't doing it. The coach over here doing this, whatever. So it created a lack of trust in people. So I was like, I just got to do everything myself. And I knew at quarterback, I'm going to touch the ball every play. I have impact every play. It is on me one way or another. So I can live with that, whether it's a success or a failure. And so going into college, I didn't want to give that up. So that dropped my prospects. So that's how I ended up at a D2 school. Okay. And I don't know if you remember this, a fun fact even about the D2 school, by the time they reached me, because they actually didn't pursue me because they figured I would go at least D1 AA. Okay. So a lot of D2 schools didn't even, D1 and up schools didn't, I'm sorry, D2 schools didn't even pursue me at all, right? Because they assumed I was going to go higher. So by the time the D2 schools like, oh, he's still not signing anywhere, because I would be honest with the recruiters when they came, like, no, I just want to play quarterback or whatever. By the time they realized that a lot of the scholarships were already given away. Right? And so I technically ended up walking on to the D2 school.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't. So I walked on. My first semester, I had no scholarship at all. Right? And one of the D2 schools, I ended up going to Midwestern, but I chose the school because of that. And then they also had a health science program that I was interested in. And so I knew that if football didn't work out, which percentage wise, we're going to do something at some point, right? And so I knew I wanted to go into something within, at the time it was dental hygienist or be a orthodontist or whatever. But that aside, that was a factor. But I walked on my freshman year.
Man, that's wild. I didn't know you walked on it freshman year. Do you think if you would have committed to playing receiver, safety, or something like that, you would have won D1?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can confidently say that. Because, like I said, I was really athletic and actually I was actually really good. I mean, I was a 6'1", 190 corner in high school.
Right. He's like, I'm playing quarterback.
Yeah, I'm playing quarterback. Yeah. I'm not playing quarterback.
He said I was going to live or die by doing it my way. You were an entrepreneur before you knew it. You know what I mean? So my next question was like, when you're thinking about your post-football career during the process, it sounds like you were a little bit, at least the industry that you wanted to be in. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so, I was fortunate enough to at least have some exposure to like people who are in like different healthcare professions. Whether I understood what their level of service was in healthcare, I knew I was exposed to it. You know what I mean? And in the first exposure actually is ironic enough through the trainers. You know? So in high school, you have trainers. And I think one year I broke my got hurt quite a bit, but one year I dislocated my collarbone and my clavicle broke, right? And so in that treatment and all that was my sophomore year. In that treatment, you're talking to the trainers, you're talking to the head staff at that time over DISD, because they would take you to the DISD trainer facility, and you're like, oh, well, how'd you get into this? Just randomly talk, because you're killing time, right? And so that person starts to say little things, and I had a natural ability to catch little things here and there and kind of hold it, and so. That piqued my interest into the healthcare arena, I guess you would say.
So that was in high school when you got like kind of peaked. That was in high school. You had an interest in that.
Sophomore year in high school, I remember because I broke my shoulder and my clavicle in practice, and I was starting at quarterback as a sophomore on varsity. I broke my shoulder that took me out the whole year. So yeah.
That's a cool story that you said. That's how you were exposed to it, because I'm always interested on how guys have like the attraction towards something, whether it's coaching or whether it's the healthcare industry, sales, being an entrepreneur, like where's that first interest? Because when I got into the healthcare industry, that was my first kind of real job after I transitioned out of football, after doing some stuff with the Cleveland Browns on the scouting side. And it was after I took an inventory of like, who did I feel comfortable speaking to, and where did I feel like I could have some level of expert knowledge? And I'm like, I'm always hurt, man. I'm talking to doctors all the time. I'm talking to physical therapists. I was like, I could talk to them. Yeah. So like, and it was at the time of learning that you were, a respiratory therapist. That's at the time when I was transitioning. And I'm like, healthcare. All right, we can kind of figure that out. So that's interesting, and I'll get us to how you transition into your company, Pulmonary Plus, there. But
for sure.
once you transition to Midwestern State, you said they got rid of 20 guys or something on the team, so it must have been
Like 20%.
20%. Like I know what that is. Like, man, Charlie Strong went through that at Texas. You go down there, you got some goons on the team. You gotta sometimes you gotta clean it up to try to get the culture right, so cats can operate.
Yeah.
It is
Culture,
what it is. Hey, man. So did you have a welcome to college moment when you got there?
What do you mean
on the field? It was like, oh man, this is college ball.
This is. What it was for me was like when you're 18 and it was more so like in spring ball, right? So you're in spring ball, so now you're like I don't know whatever string I was, second, third string, but it's spring ball. And then you look across and you're like, this dude looks like a grown man. Like he got like 3 kids. Here I am. I'm 18, and he talking mad crazy on the. I can't talk on the field. He talking mad crazy, and I'm like, all I can think to myself, bro, you like 26. You know what I'm saying? When you're young, 26 is old.
Yeah,
right?
It was old. Like, what you doing here, bro?
Yeah. Because this particular, I forgot that he had like a medical red shirt, so somehow he may not be 26, but he was in my head. He may have been 40 in my head, right? And so long story short, it was more so because you have big guys in high school, and you ain't really tripping on that, but it's more so the mental aspect of like how you're communicating with these quote unquote grown men, and you're a teenager,
right?
And now they ain't got no sympathy on you. They're gonna hit you just as hard. They don't care about your home life. They trying to keep their scholarship. So now you're introduced to like that competitiveness on an adult level. And so that was okay, I'm in college now. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Like Kaz, like, man, I done put some work into this. You ain't finna come in here and mess it up or anything like that. I had that. That's kind of how I was. Got to Penn State. I was like, oh, these cats they serious about this. Like, they ain't really, it's not too much complaining about practice. If you do, they ain't coming at you. It's like, I'm here for a reason. Yeah. Fall in line or get the stuff in. So, that's interesting when you say that. I mean, they transition with players and different things of that nature. Did you come in and immediately feel like you can play on that level with guys, or is it kind of no? You did?
No. I'm not gonna lie to you and say that. No, I think I played multiple sports in high school, right? And it was weird. Like they redshirted me. Like I told you, I was 6'1", 188 my senior year. Right?
You're big. That's a big high school prospect. Like,
yeah, right.
I wasn't that big till I got to the combine.
That's all this Texas eating. I'm sure if they checked my cholesterol, it wasn't that healthy. But all this Texas eating, baby, that's what my weight was, right? Real. And so, but when they redshirted me, it was the first time I only played football, right? So oddly enough, I started to really develop. And obviously at that time you got your hormones kicking in, you're turning 19, you're going into your 20s and stuff like that. So your body's starting to fill out a little bit, right? And so by the time that was my redshirt year, by the end of my redshirt freshman year, I was I had grew a little bit too. I was 6'2", 204. Yeah, right? And then I went from running a 4.5 in high school to I think I run like a 4.45 or 4.4. It was, but that split second, and I was like, my body. So it was weird.
Bigger and faster. That split second. That split second faster, and you an inch taller, 15 pounds heavier. Yeah, you can turn into a different type of prospect.
Exactly. So it was weird. It was interesting because you kind of can feel your physical. I ain't gonna say, lack, but when I came into college, I knew the physical difference. You know what I mean? Right. But by the end of that redshirt year, by the end of my redshirt actual plans, my redshirt freshman year, and I actually started playing, I ended up getting like freshman of the year in the whole conference and all that. But because one of the starting quarterback had got hurt, so I did play quarterback at Midwestern, obviously. And so by the end of that, I started playing. The starting quarterback got hurt, and here I am, 205, and now I realize it literally happened during the game. I'm running, and the guy has an angle on me, but I'm outrunning his angle. And I never did that in high school.
For real? You see?
No. I mean, and not to where it hit me where I
not to where you felt like, all right, I'm getting out on this guy. It's like, yeah, that's interesting. Most people, it's typically the opposite. They do it in high school, and then they get to college, like, oh, this dude's here. But you're pointing out a real important piece where just that developmental aspect in college is kind of evaporating now in the college landscape with transfer portals and NIL deals and different things of that nature. You don't get to see that maturation process from the player that was playing multiple sports coming up, and then you transition in. Now you talk about a 6'2", 205, 4'4" athlete that could play quarterback. Probably like a Midwestern. Like how did this guy get here? Like, I mean,
well, here's the thing.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, well, remember, just like I said, we didn't have no structure. We didn't have a weight program. No off season, right? It was the first time in my life I ever was part of a weight program and had an off season.
See, I was just talking stuff on Texas football in the sense that you guys do have great weight programs. I was on it with Laurel Springs athlete manager, and he's a former track coach. He was talking about Alex Proctor. He was talking about actual age versus training age. And when you're looking at track runners, if they're like thin and they got some time to put on some weight and get faster and different things of that nature. But sometimes in the recruiting world, when you looked at some of the Texas schools, that's why I was trying to draw the comparison between like a South Lake Carroll and an Oak Cliff, because you're saying, it was like a little bit more undisciplined. But then we had another guest on from South Lake Carroll, some of these other schools like around the Dallas area, and they're overly developed per se, been running the same offense since they were 8 years old. Can you just talk to me a little bit about the difference between like some of the schools that you went to, like Oak Cliff, DeSoto, and then you have, the different areas because
the suburb schools. Yeah. So I would say the biggest difference is that structure that your prior guest pointed out, right? In the inner city, obviously Oak Cliff is the inner city, and shout out to them. They just won state last year.
Shout out Oak Cliff.
But things have changed. But at the particular time, it's not to say that we had bad coaches, right? But when you got so much going on with kids at that time in their personal lives, and it was just hard for them to get a grasp on it, and so it took a lot away from football. Like they would try, like for example, sometimes they would say like, okay, everybody show up at this time for off-season training. Nobody would show up. Like when I say nobody would show up, or out of a team of 60, 70 people on varsity, 5, right? That's not the coach's fault. You know what I mean? And so I don't think so.
No, I feel you.
So, so at the end of the day, at that time, I can't speak for now, but at that time, that's what was going on, right? And the coaches were really trying to help the kids in more ways than just football. They was really trying to keep them kids out of trouble,
right?
And so, but in the suburban programs, like a South Lake Carroll, like a Highland Park, so forth and so on, you're talking about kids. Mostly all of them come from 2-parent households. Well, at least middle to upper middle class, well off, getting, so forth and so on. And when they come to football, it's football. There aren't any other worries. It's no different from why test scores in inner cities are worse than test scores in certain suburban areas. It's the same transition, because if you can't focus on something, then you're not going to be as good at it.
That's a great point, man. Especially just not slicing everybody from Texas with the same brush, right? Like, everybody's going to be fully developed. Everybody's going to have top tier coaching. You know what I mean? Because like you said, coming from South Lake, Oak Cliff, or South Lake Oak, or Plano, these different schools, it's a completely different environment depending on where they're coming from. Because I know we used to categorize different places as states when I was in recruiting, not to give away too many details, but like, you would recruit guys and you would have to bake in that developmental process into the equation. Like, all right, he's thin, but like you see his shoulders, and he might only eat one time a day based on just the look at the per capita earning interest of where he lives. Like that's, and then we've seen it. We've seen it where I've seen guys where we got recruited, we probably played with, that I recruited, where they came in, put a little bit of structure around them, turn into a completely different prospect or player, or just an opportunity to develop into that. And pointing that out, I mean, so that's interesting, because I never really I pretty much paint everybody in Texas like, all right, if they're in Texas, they're getting top tier stuff. And that aspect isn't really portrayed too much when you think about Texas high school football, and but there's a lot of athletes that come out of there, and like you said, develop into a different pace. And a lot of times, that's why those guys go to different schools and like come from like, wait, where this guy? How did he get to TCU? How this guy get to SMU?
Right.
How this guy? And like you said, you went to D2, and it's just like there's a lot of you guys that still have room to develop and turn into awesome players. That's
and some people are just late bloomers. I was a late bloomer.
At the end of the day, sometimes people are late bloomers, right? Like,
I was a late bloomer.
Just to make it, real simple. For real. Like some people are late bloomers, and I try to tell people at this point, when you're a late bloomer, there's things against you because at that time the coaches, they almost feel like they missed something, right? So it's like, man, you don't got to offer yet. Like I don't want to make it seem like I missed somebody from the sophomore. We did that with, Christian Bromore. Like he's a second round draft pick, but he popped up as a senior, and it was like, who is this D lineman? Like you can't miss a 6'4", 300-pound D lineman. It was like, I think we did, and we ended up going to Alabama, and then going to getting drafted to the Patriots. So it happens, and sometimes people are holding on because recruiting and college coaching is talent acquisition, right? Talent acquisition mixed with a little bit of sales, mixed with territory management, all of that mixed in one because you're going after these assets that are worth nothing, but in 36 months can be worth $50 million to that person and the school. So it's just a different way but that's what the recruiting game is. So like when you look at that, and that's how coaches are identifying the assets and different things of that nature, you see how they kind of go through the process of how making yourself special through it. So we talked about the landscape shifting and everything in college football. They introduced a level of entrepreneurship to the game with the NIL, game and everything. So as an entrepreneur, we got to always ask, what would have been your NIL strategy when you were in college?
Break down, if you could, give me a little bit more detail about the NIL.
No, it's 100%. It's name, image, and likeness. So everything that comes off of your, name, image, and likeness. So if Daniel Polk is there, if you wanted to host a party, you could do it. If you wanted to do a quarterback camp at Midwestern, you could do it. If you wanted to do shirts, if you wanted to start a game and have a community and did broadcasting live after games and sign up a deal with somebody else, you could do whatever you want off of your name, image, and likeness. Sign cards.
I got you.
Anything you could just profit off of your name. That's essentially what it is.
Honestly, what I would do, I wouldn't focus so much on what I want to do. I would focus on something that was missing on the campus, right? So, for example, what I mean by that is, I think in entrepreneurship overall, too many times people get so self-absorbed, like, okay, I want this to turn out like this. I want to be perceived like this. I want to do this. I want to do that. And what you have to do is that, you have a relationship with people on campus, right? Because you're an athlete. So that's name, image, and likeness aside. We don't have as much control over that as you think you do, right? You can present what you can present, but depending on the person who's looking at you, they're going to take their name, image, and likeness. It may look different, right? So you do the best you can with that, but more so, at least they know you, which is the most important thing in business anyway, just being known. And so as an athlete, if you're going that route and you're trying to establish relationships with people, always be mindful, not your name, image, and likeness, but also who the people around you that you hang with, what their name, image, and likeness is, right? Because if you say, no, I act like this, or I do this, or I do that, but the person who people associate you with is something totally different, then that's strike one. No matter if it's fair or unfair, it's strike one, right? Strike two is already against you, that you're a college student, and really not too many people don't take you that serious because you don't have enough life experience, at least in their eyes. So you only got one left. So you have to be mindful. You have to be mindful of, it's not so much about what I need or want to do. It's about, what does the campus need? What does the local community actually need? And then how can I service their need with the attention that I get as being an athlete? That's what I would
That
say.
is an amazing answer. Spoken like a true entrepreneur. Like I said, you had been an entrepreneur, like before you even came up with that, your business ideas or
But
everything from saying like, man, I'm playing quarterback at 6'1", 188 coming out of high school. I'm not playing DB. Like you've been on I'm going to do it my way. We're going to figure this out. And like you said, providing that value to the ecosystem. And that's a great answer, right? Like that's a little different than some of the answers that I've heard before, but it's 100% fact. You're like putting yourself in like, all right, you say you're a businessman or whatever the case may be, name, image, likeness, but from straight up like a business standpoint, like don't come from a selfish things. Like we always talk about authentically curating yourself, right? Because we do it we talk about dual lane processes and making sure that you're engaging with the fans. That just when you talk about having customers, I'm like, oh, you're in an ecosystem with 1 million fans. So how do we monetize that 1 million fans? And from my standpoint, but for even what you're saying from this true name, image, and likeness within a campus, now you're like at a 50,000 person ecosystem. How can I provide value here where people know that this is what I do? Like that's a whole
to them.
yeah, that's slick. So man, guys listening to the podcast or parents, man, put that in your kids' ear. You know, there is other opportunities out there besides the different deals and just promote yourself, but look for the gaps that are in your college ecosystem and fill it because you get a chance to have marketability of your name and seeing that. So like an entrepreneur like Daniel was saying, man, people knowing you is half the battle in this whole thing.
Yes.
100%. We're going to take one break real quick, do an LIG read. Get in the captain's seat and get ready to execute your acceleration plan. The best way to be successful in a competitive environment where information is power is knowing what you should do at every point in the game and when you can help create value. The same goes for making mistakes. If we understand our strengths better than anyone else, then these will give us an edge in this game. So Blue Chip Academy is here to provide resources, blueprints, and tactical knowledge to go through this process. And when you're setting up your acceleration plan at the high school level, we're here for you. So we have our Blue Chip Academy Blueprints of Success coaching program. We take you through all the different intricacies and help you through the recruiting process so that you have a competitive edge against your competition. And we also have football and business master class that goes through all the intricacies, and you can get a nice deep dive on all those things without having the commitment of, staying along with the whole process. But that's just an entry point, and then we have the program. So take a check out those. We have a link at the bottom. And at Blue Chip Academy, we provide the information and resources that empower athletes to take ownership of their careers. It's about creating leverage. And Daniel Polk, our guest, knows a lot about that. So let's jump back into the episode. Yeah, man. So back into it. So get out of Midwestern State and get to the NFL and all that good stuff. So you end up getting picked up by the Cowboys as an undrafted free agent. Being from Dallas, I played in Pittsburgh towards the end of my career, and I remember just thinking, man, it'd be different playing in your hometown. How was that experience for you?
Bittersweet. I'm gonna tell you why. Because the lesson or the understanding that I had as a high school student, this is an important thing that I think a lot of young people in particular, but men who are transitioning from different levels of football. When you're an undrafted free agent, you have a selection of which team you want to go to. So this team would say, hey, come sign with us, come sign with whatever. It's very similar enough to the recruiting process from high school to college. The one thing I forgot was that I chose going to Dallas with my emotions, not logically thinking, right? So being that kid from Dallas, you're like, man, you see that star on the side of your helmet, you're like, oh my God. You think about Michael Irvin. I grew up when Dallas was actually winning, right? we were winning Super Bowls. That was when I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, right? And so that obviously that leaves an imprint on you as a young man, a young kid. And so instead of actually looking at their roster and being like, okay, let me see who's how many receivers, because they obviously coming out of college they were picking me up as a receiver, right? Because I was quote unquote athletic, right? And so in that, but in that being as looked at as an athlete and Brandon as an athlete coming in, I should have evaluated the different systems better, and where I thought that maybe I would have had the best chance of making a team an active roster, let me say, right? And the reason why that's important is because sometimes your confidence and dare I say your ability isn't enough. In the NFL, that's not always enough, right? It's not enough that you're just as good or even better than the guy ahead of you. But if they gave that guy multi-million-dollar contract, that's an investment.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that investment doesn't work out, that coach just lost $2 million. So they're not gonna unnecessarily, unless you just shine far and beyond. Like, I think I was a good athlete, but being honest with myself, I'm not like a game changer. I'm not a TO. I'm not a once in a lifetime generation star. So unless you're that, you have to understand that it's a business. And if somebody gives anything, whether that's a house, whether that's an investment in a business, whether it's the stock market, whether it's a player, if they give them multi-million dollars, they're not going to just give up on that investment just because you walk through the door, right? And so I didn't understand that coming into it, choosing with my heart, not my head, and not understanding the culture again of the NFL, and that it's a business, it ain't personal. And so, but when I was there, it was still like living a dream, and playing, and I was doing well. But what happened, which was the best thing for me, is I actually got hurt. I tore the ligaments in my left upper hamstring, and so. Like to the point where you had to get like the steroid injection to try to get it to heal and all that. So I was never, after like the rookie mini camp and all that, I was never 100%. So a part of me kind of felt like life slighted me to some degree, right? Now, one thing I will say is that during this whole time, during the whole football process, I was in my respiratory therapy clinicals in the clinical program. And so I never actually, even in between, I went to and I would say this to the young athletes out there: never be afraid to open your mouth, right? I went to a program to where generally they would discourage you going into a science major that required you to. I had to go to clinicals at night, so I was going to actual clinicals, working in the hospital from 7 p.m. at night to 7 a.m. in the morning, right? I would come home, and obviously the coaches don't want this, right? Because it's going to take away from football. But I would come home, sleep for like 4 or 5 hours, grab me 2 monsters, go do my video, do my weight program, go to practice, and then go back to the hospital, right? And this was during the season, right? This because the program ain't gonna let up and football ain't gonna let up. So it just is what
You're in college or in NFL doing this?
I was in college.
You're in college doing this.
So this is my transition to the NFL. So I was in the respiratory therapy program as I'm getting picked up in the NFL.
Got it.
Right. And so I get picked up. Now in that summertime, all my other classmates, the time where we had to do our clinical NICU rotation in the hospitals was literally the same time as the rookie minicamp. And so I think that where I made a good decision at, by the grace of God, I made a good decision. And I said, okay, listen, I'm not going to not finish my clinical, because if I didn't go to my NICU clinicals, I wouldn't have been able to graduate the program.
You got it.
Right. So it was like, okay, well, let me go open my mouth and go talk to the program director at the school, because I know that the Cowboys ain't going to alter their plans for me. Right. So I go talk to the program director, and they was able to get it worked out to where I was able to do my clinicals a week before actually reporting to camp. So finished my NICU rotation, went into Dallas. I got hurt, but thank God from that point, I was only a semester from graduating. But if I didn't finish that one tidbit, that one decision, I would have had to start the program all the way back over again, essentially setting me back almost 3 years.
What? So you had to,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I say all that in saying is that there was a lot of mixed emotions going on while I'm in the actual camp with the Cowboys, because I'm living my dream. Yes, there was a little bit of bitterness because I can't really play like I want to, because I'm hobbled, right? But yet they're saying that, oh no, you're good enough to play. You know how that goes. which is fine. It's okay. You're good enough to play. But in the same breath, I have some sense of like foundation because I'm like, okay, well, if this doesn't work out, at least I finished this part of my program.
Did that feel like giving you leverage? Like when you finished that program, like I know you spelled torn and things of that nature, but I remember that was like always a thought when I got into the league was like, man, I need some leverage. Like I know this is great. I'm living my dream. I'm doing this thing. I'm like, but man, you gotta have something outside of this. This thing is cutthroat. You know, I mean, week 3, my head coach was gone, right? Like I was first 2 years of the league. I was on my started my second year. I was on my 3rd head coach. So just seeing all that, my whole thing has always been like leverage, whether it's saving money and having a business on the side, having that next career path that you're working on. And I always knew I wanted to be a GM or whatever the case may be. So I thought, you know, I'm putting in that bucket while I'm working. I'm in football and things of that nature. So like hearing you say that you had, you know, your respiratory therapy program going on while you're trying to live out your dream, that does pull on both ends of the spectrum where you're trying to do your thing and move forward in both. But it's like you're going through this whole thing with the Cowboys, and you guys were on Hard Knocks, right, during the time? Yeah. So like regardless of everything that's going on, it's like, hey, I'm doing this. I'm trying to do my thing. It's hard to make it in the league. It's hard to make it as an undrafted free agent. I'm hurt. I'm doing a program. Well, how is that even now that you're on HBO doing all of this in front of all your people?
Yeah, I know, right? I got cut on TV. So you add that little extra to it, right?
That's a big extra because people don't like understand the emotional fortitude of camp, man. You see cats break. You see cats stressed out. Especially getting hurt in football in the NFL as a draft pick, it was hard. I can only imagine as being an undrafted free agent, getting hurt, still trying to make it. I got this program over here. If I drop this, I got to start over here. And it's like, I got to do it. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, you know, the thing is, all athletes and people in general, but in this case, athletes, you have to always be not selfish, but you have to understand that you have to be in the business of you first, right? And so the NFL is not an endpoint, it's a launching pad, one way or another, right? And I think too many athletes, because you're doing it so long and it's like, oh, this is the goal, but it's like, no, it's really the beginning. It's like really the start line. You know what I mean? And so if you go into it with that outlook, I was blessed enough, like my cousin was already in the league, right? So I kind of saw his journey in a sense, and that allowed for me to be able to say, okay, well, yeah, it can go this way, it can go that way, but either way, it's better to get the opportunity, possibly get some money. And even if it's like, okay, I'm gonna take this money and pay off debts that you may have. I'm gonna take this because, you know, like I said, I walked on, so that, you know, I had student loans.
I had real bills. Stop.
Yeah, I had real bills. Okay, so I said, if nothing else, I'm gonna try to get this thing just to pay off my student loans, right?
To the league to pay off my student loans. That's I'm always fascinated by like what people are thinking about when they get. I mean, if I get to, I'll pay off these student loans, dog. That's real.
It's the truth, you know. So because it is like I wasn't like I knew I had to pay it back. Now I don't know, you know, everybody has their feel their way about student loans today, but I knew I had to pay mine back. So that's where my head was at. But all that being said, though, I initially get released from Dallas, and then I was like, okay, you're gonna go back to school. Now going back to the name, image, and likeness, right? To kind of bring the 2 points together. While I was my senior year, I started a program to where the local high schools would come up to Midwestern State and they would tour the campus. Okay. Because at the time, Midwestern was getting a bad rap for not having enough local civilians who are from Wichita Falls, Texas, going to the actual university. So me hearing this, I go to the 3 local high schools and I say, hey, I want to have a program where the kids actually come to the campus, because most of the kids never even came to the campus. They come to the campus on our homecoming week, and they come to the campus, they tour the campus, they see out there, they see the fraternities, they see the sororities, they see the college life, kind of put their bug in their ear about, you know, this is a good school. You don't have to leave to get the college experience. And I solved the problem of kids going to college, because a couple of those kids actually came to Midwestern based on that tour that I set up. And then the school got students, right? So that was me connecting two parties. Now, circling back to after me getting released, I don't have my scholarship. I'm not playing football in college no more. I don't have any money. The president, he obviously gets wind I'm coming back to school. They give me a presidential scholarship to finish out the rest of my time in school.
Look,
right? Because I did something for them that you can quantify. And I think that's where people kind of they really, really lose touch with what business is, even if it's nonprofit. You have to be able to tangibly quantify results, right? I could actually quantify, said X amount of students. I think it was like we had like 300 students came to campus, and X amount of those students actually enrolled, which turns out to be X amount of dollars for the university, right? And they knew that so much to the point where I ended up being, I was able to attend in Austin an actual congressional meeting about student athletes getting scholarships and things like that in Texas, from Texas, if you're from the state of Texas, going to Texas universities and things like that. So it opened up it opened up my mind to the prospect that if I can connect people with tangible results, not all it feels good, and it's okay to feel good and do things for people that makes them feel good. I'm not diminishing that, but I can tangibly say, no, this is the result of me doing X, and it got me Y, and it got you Z, right? So
profit equals progress, baby. I love it. I mean, that's at the end of the day. But then also the real thing is like the critical ability to ecosystem build, right? To build ecosystems in the sense of like having that and having your own ecosystem and networking base to an extent. Like obviously building a business operation where it's like connecting two parties, being a real value add to both organizations and schools, and like that is the ecosystem of building a business and your own little again, another leverage network to your point. So like we get into that, having that mentality is just not, I mean, it makes so much sense. And it kind of is the preface of us getting into you getting an offer from a NFL team and saying, nah, I'm gonna go pursue my career. I think when people hear that, I mean, I couldn't fathom what you first told me. It was like, wait, you turned down an NFL offer to go chase something? That means one, you felt so good about what you were doing. Maybe not so good, just I'm gonna put my money here. What gave you that?
Yeah.
I mean, like what kind of felt like, what gave you that leverage to turn down a contract and run into that next phase of your life before you get started? Because I feel like that's where guys get lost in that rigor like that transition period. Like, man, you saw me in the transition period when I was like trying to figure it out, talking and like all those different things. So what made you feel that way?
Two things. It was three things. It was faith in God, faith in myself, and observing the landscape. And so what I mean by that is that in that time from I got released from Dallas to eventually the Saints offering me a contract, I sat back and I would observe and listen to the stories and the different scenarios that different players was going through, right? And I'm gonna tell you when I really was like, I'm gonna make sure. When I really made the decision in my mind to say no, I'm gonna finish school. It was literally the night before the Saints offered me, right? No lie. I remember this guy that we were at dinner that night before I went back up to the hotel. Before the next morning was the actual workout, right? So I read dinner, and the whole time I've been like just praying and just asking, like just trying to say, man, what do I really want to do? I can't, because I knew at some point you got to make a decision. You got to go left or right. You can't live your life in the middle. It's just not how it works. And so, so at that time I read dinner, the guys, and this one guy mentions that he actually made a roster, right? He makes the roster. 2 weeks later, he gets cut from the roster. And I said, oh no, this ain't it. I didn't say that to that young man at the time. Internally, I was like, nah, this ain't for me. Because the one way to build wealth, you do have to risk take, Justin, but you have to have stability. You have to have stability. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they reach for the ceiling without building their floor, without laying their foundation.
Preach.
So, you know, at the end of the day, when I was looking at the instability, at least for my particular position, like I wasn't this big time draft pick. I wasn't on none of that. You got to know where you're at in life, right? And so, me knowing that, I was like, okay, for me, this is going to be a shaky thing, and that's okay. I'm cool with risk. I have no issue with risk taking whatsoever. But there are certain things that when you calculate, you're like, this ain't worth the risk. So I was like, it's better over a long period of time. And I'm gonna tell you another thing. At the time, I remember the league minimum being $315,000, I believe, right? So we're in the rookie meeting, and I'm sitting there, and they're like, yeah, the league minimum is $315,000. Most guys will be out of the league in 3 years, right? I said, okay, cool. That was, I don't know if that's the exact same numbers now, but
It's like 2.6. Like that's what it is. Like 2.6
yeah.
still to this day. Like,
So it dropped. But we're gonna give it some, right? We're gonna overshoot. We're gonna say 3 years. Let's just say you're not on press squad any of those 3 years. It was just at the time he's all active 3 years. I said, okay, all right, 315. So I'll say, all right, you're looking at, I was gonna say make the numbers even $1 million. I said, cool. At the time, the tax rate was 39%. Okay, so I was like, okay, you make $1 million, you got a 39% tax rate over the 3 years without state tax, right? Because even though we were in Texas, you jump in California, you jump in some of these more high tax states, you're paying state tax, you're paying city tax, municipalities tax, and you ain't, that's just the way that the system is set up. So I understood that. So I was like, okay, $1 million, 39%. I'm already down 400. Out the gate, I'm down 400. And then they added another, and so that's before you add in a family, that's before you add in housing, food, like the bare essentials of life. And even if you come out with, let's say, $300,000, that's still more than a lot of people get. But here's the kicker, right? The thing that got me is when they said, oh, well, most of the time athletes struggle with the career afterwards because name, image, and likeness, people didn't take them serious. That was what was told to us, to me.
I wasn't told that, but that's the realest thing. I wish we was always told that, people like athletes. Oh, no, I went to Penn State. So it was like, boom, you see success stories all the time. So I got hit with that reality in my face when I got out of the game. I was like, wait, everybody ain't taking me serious. I'm like, look at my resume. Like, no, I did this. I was like, I've done X, Y, Z.
Right.
But to your point of what you're saying, I was told the other way. Like, I'm going to get this credit from being an athlete and but there's a way that you have to present yourself and going through the process to use sports as a catalyst to a career you can bank on. Because I love when you said the NFL is a launching point, like a launching pad, because it's not the end goal. And when you make it the end goal, kind of lose perspective on what it is. Obviously, like you said, 5% of the guys can make lifetime money. You can set your family up, and it's like guys make $100 million. We see that come up all the time. Mm-hmm. But even with Polk saying, from making these decisions, it's not like a hindsight 2020 that you're saying. Like, you really lived this out. Like, you turned down the contract and was like, I'm going to this next phase based on these different type of things. But that's literally going through and playing the chess moves of like, all right, I'm using sports as a catalyst to a career that I can truly bank on. So with that being said, I mean, we're going into, you know that you were in the respiratory therapist program in college and going through the process. Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
No.
When did that come about? Because like listening to you, it sounds like if there was somebody that was in business around you, like, yo, bro, you're a businessman to me, dog. Like, it sounds like you had bringing the school together with the high school. You doing your stuff and doing the taxes as an undrafted. I'm gonna go this career route, like, So you would think, you know what I mean?
No, I had literally no actual concept of being an entrepreneur. I had a concept of maybe investing. I wanted to do like real estate and things like that, which I know you're aware of, but being an actual entrepreneur, no. I think what turned it on for me is that I always had the ability to express myself and articulate myself. And so when I was in respiratory, to make a long story short, I was in respiratory. I started working in the hospital. I was working night shift, didn't like it, ended up going to medical equipment, working for a medical equipment company. And matter of fact, you saw me pull up in a big white van. So,
Yeah, that was the
so I was
days.
working for a
Yeah.
medical, yeah. So I was working for a medical equipment company. And so one day, I was just as a clinician, and one day the salesmen were having issues with their sales, right? So I was like, well, if you need me to help, in passing, I said to one of the salesmen, if you need me to help, I know that these are life support patients. You're not RT, because I'm just trying to make the business better. So you can't think about yourself as an entrepreneur, and even if you're working for someone, how you can make the business better, because that brings stability for everybody. So I'm like, hey, if you need me to help you out, I'll come. Just make sure you ask, my boss at the time. I'm like, just make sure you ask him. If he says, okay, I'll come ride with you, whatever. So I'm thinking that he didn't take me serious. Like a month or so later, he says, hey, Daniel, can you come to this appointment with me? I'm trying to get this particular facility to give us life support patients. They go home on life support ventilators and things like that. I go, and then it's slowly but surely his sales starts picking up. And so I think they had like 4 salesmen. So the other salesmen started getting jealous. And they was like, how can so-and-so, how can you give him help and not give us help? And so then they started saying, okay, Daniel, when these other salesmen go to their lunches, you go with them. So then as I'm sitting there, and they would just sit back and let me talk. And as because I did have a natural knack to understand people's needs, right? So as I'm speaking to these different clinicians, these doctors, these facilities, case managers, etc., I sat back and I started to garner relationships with people and understand the culture of healthcare, especially in Texas. It's not the same everywhere. And in that, the manager comes to me one day and says, you ever think about sales? So now people are putting that seed in my ear. I'm just working and going home. Okay?
Trying to get to the bag, bro.
Yeah. So they was like, you ever think about sales? And I was like, nah. They was like, you should think about it. So then one day it was a particular children's hospital that it was years before they were able to get referrals out of this particular children's hospital. And they said, hey, Daniel, you mind going and just seeing if this to be the only referral source you have to worry about. Just do that. And then everything else, you still do your clinical stuff. I was like, all right, cool. So I go up and we started getting referrals from that hospital, right? And so in that, they was like, no, you're just gonna do sales. Now, when that happened, the management from the corporation starts coming down to Dallas. And they're trying to figure out things with the company, try to make the branch better and things like that. And so there was a particular device from a new manufacturer that they was like, hey, Daniel. And at this time I had already had my master's and I've been doing sales and had my clinical experience and all that. And they were like, okay, hey, Daniel, we got this device. We don't know if we want to take it on. Can you do the market analysis on it? We'll be back in a month and all this. Now, let me, I forgot to mention this part. By this time I left that company full time and I was only working there part time because they didn't want me to leave so bad that they was like, just come part time. But I had started working full time for the VA hospital and stuff. And so that tells you how much I really still didn't have the entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm still just trying to find the best job, really, to be honest with you. Federal benefits.
It's a mindset shift, though. It really is a mindset shift. Like we'll get into it a little bit, but I'm saying it because this is a pivotal point again in my career in the transition where I'm like, all right, I'm coming out of football, not realizing I had you as a football player 5-6 years. You develop an entrepreneurial mindset where you're like, all right, I have this to do, have that. This is I report this to my client, blah blah blah. Not realizing it, but I had a path of what I wanted to do. Not that you challenged my path, but there was levels in which my path where it was like. I saw the passion in which you were going after, and I was like, hold up, do I feel that way about this? I used to have to question myself. I'm like, I know what special sauce, I know what it looked like when somebody's on to something. And I'm like, do I feel that way, or am I just kind of using the cards that have been dealt to me to kind of go towards that path? You know what I mean? But you saying everything that you're talking about, being a dynamic professional, being creative, and having an impactful initiative when you're at the job, right? Being able to be a respiratory therapist. And real quick, can you jump into that? What is a respiratory therapist? Because when you told me you were that's what you did. I was like, well, what is that?
I didn't know what it was until I got to college. Essentially, what a respiratory therapist is like a nurse for life support machines, most predominantly in the hospital. So when you go into the ICU and the doctors are like, hey, can this person come off life support? Or, hey, what is the life support machine doing today? What are you noticing? This, that, and the third. We're the ones who report to the doctor after assessing the patients on the life support machine to say, hey, I think they can or can't do X, Y, and Z. And then in that, the doctor used that information to make decisions to pull people off life support. Very similar to a nurse, but it's a specialty just for that.
Got you. So we get back into it. So you're doing that. You get the opportunity. You bring both together because, right, like we talk about it with coaches, people in administration, or even just football players, or as athletes using sports as a catalyst to a career that they can bank on, using that didactic knowledge from that you pick up from sports, whether it's competitive nature, embracing being creative, trying to be a value add in different situations, and being able to have confidence to make a play when those things happen. Like you say, you saw opportunity, like, oh, I can help out here. I can help out there. It just reminds me of the time when I was at ATI. One of the greatest things I could do as a sales guy or business development manager was to bring my physical therapist out and, talk about the different services they have. And it would give a different level of accreditation to the doctors to like open it up. So for you to be able to do both, I recognize that as like a sweet spot. When you started telling me that, I'm like, oh, you're onto something there. You know what I mean? So
didn't realize it though.
God's path, right? You keep walking it out and it keeps revealing itself. So like I said, when I recognized Polk's, like, just passion for the opportunity that I was in and just diving into entrepreneurship and all that good stuff. It's like I said, you talk about making a play, founding Pulmonary Plus. From the story that you're telling, can you continue to go on about the hospital brings you in, they're trying to do the device, go for it.
So it was I was working at the VA hospital full time, doing that part time, but now I'm pretty much just sales now, doing that, right? And so one of the higher up, one of the like founders of the company come down and asked me to do the analysis of this particular device at the time. And it was a type of ventilator machine, a volume ventilator, not get too clinical. So anyway, it was a machine to help people breathe. And they come back. Now I done spent all this time, doing this analysis. And I'm really like, because in my head, still not thinking like an entrepreneur, I'm thinking, okay, if they just let me run this part of their organization, I ain't thinking about me, right? I'm not thinking about me. I was like, okay, well, if they let me do this, then not. But man, there is no competition here, like in this particular bubble. And I was watching at the time. Coincidentally, I was watching a series called "The Men Who Built America," right? And as I was watching it, I started to notice a consistent theme that competition, especially for a small business, is very, very, very bad, right? And a lot of times we hear people say, "Oh, I want to go into this business, that business, because this industry makes this much money." Well, you got to think about that competition. But what makes you different? You know what I mean? So that's not to say that there wasn't already medical equipment companies. Clearly, there are, but there was no medical equipment company that was providing this service. And so I present this to the powers that be at that company, and they was like, oh, they just kind of just literally, like, I'm not gonna say insulting, but pretty close, right? And they was like, and they made a slight joke where they was like, well, if you believe that much into it, you should do it, ha ha ha, like legitimately
to laughing.
To me. And now I'm the type of person. Not to say that I do things out of spite, but that rubbed me wrong. I was like, oh, okay, I will. Right? So I was like, all right, fine. So time goes on. Now at that particular time in healthcare, you had the manufacturer, you had distributors, and then you had providers. The company I worked for was a provider, right? And they didn't want nothing to do with the product. They was like, we ain't gonna do it. I said, fine. So when they said, if you believe in so much, you do it, ha ha ha. In the process of doing the analysis for the particular device, I garnered a relationship with the manufacturer rep, right? So the manufacturer rep was like, he lived in Austin. He had nobody in Dallas. I went to him, I said, listen, I can do the setups for you for this. And because the distributor didn't have a clinician to do it. So I was like, I'll do the setups for you. And if I do the setups for you, just give me a clinical fee for it. So he goes back to his bosses. They come back and say, yeah, we'll pay you $500. Now at that time, Justin, I was making $19, $20 an hour, right? So the time comes later, And they were like, hey, Daniel, we got somebody to put this device on. It took me 30 minutes to do it. And I made $500. And I said, what am I doing? What am I doing? Because I was like, I just made $500 where that would have taken me X amount of hours to do that if I was at the hospital, right? So now my wheels are turning.
We turning, dog.
Now my wheels are turning, simply because it was just like just the time. I didn't, just the time. And it wasn't that I wasn't doing what I love. I was doing more of what I love because I was able to pour more into people, and things like that. So time goes on, and the distributor and the manufacturer have a falling out. Now the manufacturer has nobody to even distribute in the state. And I'm just so happen to be here as this fallout happens.
Timing, man. You talk about timing and preparation. You
gotta be prepared, because the whole time I had done my research. I had already honed a lot of my skills working in the ICUs in the hospital and all of that. And so now they fall out, and I'm just kind of here. And the manufacturer the manufacturer's out of California. The rep for the manufacturer's in Austin. Nobody's in Dallas. So I go to them. I say, hey, let me do this for you as a distributor. Now goes back to the people not taking you serious. They did not want to do that. They didn't want to do that. They didn't take me that serious, right? And so I said, okay. I asked them for months and months. No, Daniel, we'll give you a clinical fee to set them up. Okay, cool. So then one day, a patient comes up and her insurance would not pay for the device, and they come to me and the particular doctor who ordered this trial device on, they wouldn't. He was like, they really want him because he's a big time doctor in Dallas at the time, right? This is 2013, right? So 2013, 14. So he's a big time doctor. They really, really want him to like this device, and it didn't happen because they couldn't get the insurance paid for it. And the patient was like, I'm not paying for this out of pocket. It was really expensive. Yeah. So then now they come to me, right? And now they come to me and they say, well, if you can get it, now I ain't got no money like that, right? I made my $500, but I'm still working, whatever. So they say, hey, well, if you can get it paid for, then we'll give it to you on consignment, and you just give us the profit. You just give us what the device costs, and you take the profit. So I said, all right, cool. So at the time, it's changed now, but at the time you can write letters of medical necessity to the insurance companies. The insurance companies would evaluate that patient scenario, and they'll either approve payment or not. And they couldn't do it. So I had to teach myself. You have to be able to learn and be self-taught. I had to teach myself how to actually apply and submit information to an insurance company. Nobody helped me with that, right? So I do that, and I just keep getting these denials. I'm like, because I'm thinking this is the breakthrough, like you were saying, you're right there. So one day, I'm driving down the interstate, and I won't say the name of the insurance company, but I was driving down the interstate, and I look off the interstate, and the insurance company is right there. And I said, okay, and I exit. And I turn around, and not kind of ignorant to a sense, I didn't know you were not supposed to go in there because the building's locked down.
Okay, I didn't know that either.
You're not. Because it's too much of a risk. A lot of things happen. So because people get mad at insurance companies and stuff like that for denying stuff, so they have the building locked down. So I could have just turned around. I sat by the door, right? And that's just that determination now kicking in, because I'm like, I'm gotten this far. So I sit by the door until somebody randomly walks out. I go in. And I go to the front desk and I say, hey, I need to talk to somebody about a patient, whatever. Now, truth be told, the patient was in the ICU. The patient could not go home without this device. They couldn't. And they was being held in the ICU for multiple days. I think that at this time, like multiple weeks. So that eventually somebody was like, okay, well, we'll get somebody to come down just to kind of get me like out of there in a sense. A manager comes down. I say, hey, this person so-and-so has been in the ICU for X amount of days. Now, at that time, I looked up the average cost of a patient stay in the ICU. I said, every day that this patient's in the ICU, they cost me y'all $15,000. I said, this device costs $10,000. The person been in the ICU for 8 days. I said, now, they need it, but it would benefit you guys as well if you actually pay for it and get them out of the hospital, because the doctor's not going to discharge them. all true. A week later, they paid it.
Now we rolling.
And now we rolling. I took all of that money, but I didn't take that money and just go ball out. I took that money and invested everything, the whole thing back into the company. So overall, the amount of money I put into the company out of our own pocket was $1,200.
But that was the birth for Pulmonary Plus.
That was the birth. That was it. Yeah. And so from there, my goal was 10 patients because I knew what 10 patients would bring. It was far more than me and Tara, my wife's salary. And now we have 260.
Ooh. Times 267 for the listeners. I gotta love the entrepreneur story. Gotta love it, man. Gotta love just the path, man. I just love these blueprints and just understanding the codes. It got me juiced up with the story because it gives me back memories. Because as I go through the entrepreneurial path, transitioning out of football, sports executive, Polk has always been somebody that I've regained our communication and just the times that we talked and remembering his transition and just different things that he's going through. And it's always an inspiring story for me. And just to give some details for the players maybe going through, what type of players do you think should follow an entrepreneurial path, like traits, ideal personality?
Players who, the main trait is being able to articulate yourself. If you can't communicate, it don't matter what talent, what skill. It's like having a product without a highway. If you can't, your mouth and ability to talk to people and to listen to people and to bring together parties and what they need, if you can do that naturally, then you can be an entrepreneur. I think the biggest mistake that I think a lot of players make, in my assessment, is that they leave the athletic world. That's actually, even though I did.
You did, but you actually kind of didn't. Because you started while you were still within this, within it, right? We had somebody on, Deion Butler. He started doing cybersecurity when he was still playing. So it was like that baseline while you're, and then
I never really left it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So let's say if you are an athlete, think about it like this, and I think this will give good context. Let's say you have a med student. Person goes to med school, pre-med, med school, residency, fellowship. Now they're a full-blown doctor, right? Let's say even a surgeon. And then they wake up one day and say, well, I want to be a fashion designer. Think people going to take them serious? Right? You spent your whole life as an athlete developing, interacting with people in the sports arena. You have a doctor, and dare I say, you are a surgeon, especially when you get to the NFL level, and a professional athlete level in general, whatever that sport may be. You are the cream. You know more than anybody know that you come across more about that sport than most people that you come across will ever know in their lifetime. You forgot it, right? So understand that that's where your skill is, right? That's where your actual skill is. That's what you know. So lean into that culture, lean into that industry. It may not be being a coach. It may not, I'm talking about strictly entrepreneurship. You know the ins and outs of it because you've been living it your whole life. So find what people need in that, bridge those things together, and you're going to be more successful than not. And dare I say, do your best not to take, and this is just like a business philosophy of mine, but do your best not to take loans out. Do your best, I would even say do your best to try not to hire people out the gate. Because you need to learn what works and doesn't work for yourself first before you can ever guide somebody else in your company. I did everything myself. Anything that comes with being in a medical equipment company, I did everything myself before I even thought about hiring. We even thought about hiring people, right? And so you have to be able to understand the ins and outs. And that doesn't mean that you did everything good. I didn't do it. I didn't do everything good. We have people. My wife does the bookkeeping and the CFO of the company and the financial things, all that better than I do. But I had to at least be able to tell her, okay, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense in our industry. And then she just took it from there, right? And so I started to hire people who had more talent or maybe a different personality disposition that aided to mine. But you have to know what it is. And so as an athlete, I would encourage all athletes to don't be ashamed of being an athlete. I think that happens too many times. Like you're proud of being an athlete while you're an athlete, but then when you become you're no longer playing, now you're ashamed of it. But it's like, no, you lean into it. This is what I know. I know more about the body and performance than 99% of people. I know more about the culture of that sport than 99% of people. I know, you know what I mean? So lean into that. And there's people who are trying to think about it. There's people who are trying to get to where you were, and you can be profitable and be a help to them in the process. So it's not that I'm trying to make it that simple, but it's that straightforward.
That is pretty straightforward. And like you just pointed it down right through the things from the top of the point where it's communicate naturally and leaning into your industry or your strengths. Cause that's something that, I used to struggle with coming out of the game. And like, I remember we used to talk about entrepreneurship between us, and even thinking about coming up in sports or being in football. I feel like there's a limited space of being an entrepreneur, right? You talked about the culture earlier. Think about a company culture. You come up with a mentality of almost operating in a company culture. So to think, even to move outside of that, like I thought going on the path was like going to be a general manager is like entrepreneur, but that's like still a company culture to an extent, and leaning into your industry, because when you get out of that in that entrepreneurial spirit, or you got to kind of build that thing, it is stepping outside and almost an individualized approach outside of the structure of what you might be used to. And a lot of times what you see within our industry in football is like super like that. So when we used to talk about entrepreneurship, I didn't think you could do it in sports. Like, remember, a lot of times when we were talking about entrepreneur, I was thinking about being an art advisor. Everybody, ladies and gentlemen, like an art curator. I wanted to put on stuff in museums. And we could get into that. We'll talk about that. You can see all the art books and stuff behind me and stuff. But it wasn't for fake. It's still not, you know what I mean? But it was always, I would do the research, kind of, blueprints of success, and like, all right, who's the top art person? Who's the top real estate? And you would like look at their paths. Kind of the outliers method from what's his name? Malcolm Gladwell. But just the aspect of everything lining up and people having this unique story or unique value proposition or perspective on their industry when they started their business. All the titans, everybody at the top of their industry. And, that's always what I wanted to do. And I'm like, well, damn, that's why football's got to be it for me. I started that at 8. I have a critical thing, but like, where is the entrepreneurial space in it? It was always like, GM, that's the one that puts all the pieces in place. Like, that's the closest thing in my recollection to like what it could be. So like, I'm so happy that you're saying communicate naturally and lean into your industry, because that's something I always believed you should do. But I was like, where is the avenue? And don't be ashamed of being an athlete, because that does happen where when you're done playing, and you're transitioning, people ask you, what's up next? There's a level of embarrassment because you're not that anymore, right? And if there isn't something set up, when we talk about having leverage, moving into that next phase of your career, life, or whatever that may be, it does get dicey. So like, I think that's like those are great tidbits. Communicate naturally, lean into your industry, and know that you're an expert at your different things. And this will be the last question, because we put together curriculums and different things at Blue Chip Academy for that exact purpose, for its acceleration plans. Because believing, if you want to go to the NFL, it's a launching pad. It's not the end of the day, but a lot of things in the industry are set up to be, that's the end goal. But like, where are all the services to set them up for that's a part of the goal and the intricacies beyond, right? Like, I worked at the league level. I worked as a recruiting coordinator. I played in the NFL, worked on how they get recruited and all these different things. So what do you think an accelerated path to entrepreneurship would look like for an athlete, so they can use compounding exposure in sports to aid in building the skills required to step out on their own and limit those gaps of being an entrepreneur? So like the same thing that you were kind of going through in high school and seeing the stuff that was happening in your culture. Say you want like the framework of what you were doing was an entrepreneur's framework. You just didn't know kind of those were the framework of what it was. But what do you think that would look like when you were in high school to almost be in a incubated entrepreneurial path for an athlete? Like, what would that look like for you?
What I would say, if you always stay service oriented, no matter what culture you're in, what I mean by that is, what am I offering that people need? Whether that's in the coaching, football team, entrepreneurship. You know what the funny thing about it, even in the context of the term is being accelerated, the things like what you think is acceleration in entrepreneurship isn't, and what you think is not acceleration is. You know what I mean? Like, there was times, every interaction matters. The biggest, should I say, like, connections and things that I've garnered in this industry came from somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. It wasn't even me talking to them directly. So never belittle and thinking that, oh, I need to talk to this person because when I talk to this person, then this is going to happen. There is no accelerated path to entrepreneurship. It's one day at a time, consistency. Just like you did, a person does football since they're 7. You get drafted at 22, 21, 20. You know, Entrepreneurship is no different. It took us 10 years. I was able to quit my job I was able to quit completely after 2 years, right? It was no longer a side thing. But it now in the 9th and 10th year is where we're really reaping the benefits of it. That's 10 years. So you have to be patient. You have to accelerate your skill. Now, I will say that. Accelerate your skill.
And I guess that was to better frame the question. I think that's what I'm saying. Like, what would an institution look like to create or harvest those skills for athletes so that they can fill those gaps, right? So when it's time to transition, like I'm thinking, all right, every interaction, this can be an opportunity in 9th, 10th grade. So I'm thinking like that. When I get to college and they're having that idea, like, all right, I'm an NIL opportunity. I'm getting to college. I'm not just trying to get a deal with the local deli. We don't have a deli or we don't have a wing spot. Like, I know somebody that I could put this in. We can have King's Wings or whatever the case may be. Right. Like, shut up. You know what I'm saying? But like all those different examples, there's a exposure and thing that kind of, it gives you ready to be like, because I would say that you I feel like you were on an accelerated path to entrepreneurship when I listened to your story. But you were trailblazing yourself. No one wasn't doing it. You know what I mean? But it was like the blocks were being put. Like it's interesting to hear.
I would say, to answer your question better, I'll say what it looks like. It looks like a system collegiately that offers you something outside of football in development. If you don't have a coaching staff, when they talk to you, they actually know what your other talents are. You know, or even what your talents aren't. If a coach knows that, hey, maybe this player doesn't do X, Y, and Z in their personal life well, but at this school we can help develop that part of you. You know, or if this player has an actual a talent outside of football in this, and they can help further develop that. You have to be able to develop individually as a person to be a good entrepreneur. And if you're only, I know we spoke earlier about the culture of the team and fitting into the team system and things like that. But that culture of that school outside of football has to help you become a well-rounded individual. Once you become a well-rounded individual, opportunities will open up. You just have to be solidified in yourself enough to take advantage of it. And that's what I was able to do, you know, and I'm thankful for it, to be honest with you. Because I'll say this to bring it in. When I told my coaches that I wanted to go into the respiratory program, they didn't say nothing. They said, okay. And you don't want that coach, for that young man who may not be as confident as I was or solidified in myself as I was at the time, to put that seed of doubt in their head, right? Because they could have said, well, do you really want to do that?
Right.
And the next thing you know, they're saying to themselves, do I really want to do that? You know?
I wonder, something just might throw it out there. I just wonder if you were at a Power 5 school and you were a primetime player and you were thinking about if they did say that, and like at the school that you were in the climate that it was, you benefiting both ends kind of gives you a perspective on how to go about it and how that sets yourself up for the rest of the career. Because I think these are all the critical points that we talk about within the process. And all we just know is be eligible, get a scholarship offer, go to the league, save your money. And this is like, man, if that's not step one, that might be 0.001 before that. But it's like, there's so like we feel like we just got the telephone version of like the keys to success along the path. And it's like, we really going through it to another level of transcribing trailblazing. And I always use you as a great example. And I mean, great answer along the way. Just it's an internal value or internal development as an entrepreneur, and understanding as a high school player or just moving up through the process, being aware of what you need to work on. Like we see film every day, radical transparency. Like you can be radical and real with yourself, looking in the mirror as you're going through this process and different things of that nature. Because if you think you want to be a businessman and different things of that nature, the elite sports process can get you ready for the rigors of entrepreneurial lifestyle and just the things that come with it. So Man, thank you
Teach how to
for
compete.
all that. Competing, resilience,
Yeah.
quick thinking, creating value, everything that you said. And sometimes like even like name, image, and likeness can just accelerate that from the standpoint of people knowing you. But there's no acceleration on the aspect of building. But there's a ready of like getting the foundation ready, like Daniel said earlier. Man, it's been a great episode. And so we're going to end on this, man. What's the career end goal? Because like, man, we can write a book after this one.
For me,
Yeah, for you.
For me, it's either one of two paths. Either one day we grow, we've had offers to sell our company before, but grow it to the point where we sell the company and kind of retire, or pass it down to our kids. That's it.
Hey, using sports as a catalyst to a career you can bank on, man. My man Daniel Polk did it to the T, man. It can put a blueprint out specifically on him, the entrepreneurial path going through, respiratory therapist to founding Pulmonary Plus and having a great business. And like, again, use a lot of great tidbits going through this process, man. Just understand that the NFL is a launching pad. It's not the end goal or anything. Understand that communicating effectively, understanding what value you can bring to the ecosystem is something that can go along through this whole path. Make informed decisions, being logical and understanding where you're at. Challenge yourself in the culture in which you know that you'll survive and thrive. So again, you guys download this episode, subscribe to the YouTube channel and all those good things. And when you get a chance, download the recruiting checklist. And if you guys ever need anything, we have the coaching program, Blueprints of Success, helping you guys through the intricacies, through the recruiting process, because this is the intro into the sports business world and where you can set those blocks up so that you can have a successful career and while using sports as a catalyst to a career you can bank on. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. Daniel Polk, great episode, man. Thank you for checking in.